Next week, voters will decide the fate of levy and bond issues in school districts throughout Northeast Ohio. Across the state, public school funding has become a very hot-button issue, fueling controversy, calls for change, and even lawsuits.
And tonight we begin a week-long series, The Price of Education, the funding battle for Ohio's schools. We start with 3 News Investigates' Lena Lai, looking at how this fight began and why it is far from over.
Every day, about 1.7 million Ohio students head into public schools.
Good morning.
But behind each classroom is a complicated and often controversial system of funding that affects every lesson taught, every teacher hired, and every opportunity students receive. Public education in Ohio is funded through a mix of local property taxes, state dollars, and federal funds. Note the biggest part of the pie comes from local property taxes. Yet the Ohio Constitution declares that the General Assembly shall secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools. So in 1997, a landmark ruling by the Ohio Supreme Court that declared this system of funding to be unconstitutional.
And it did it for a couple of reasons. One was because there was an over-reliance on local property taxes, which leads to huge inequities in terms of how schools are funded.
That means that wealthier communities with higher property values can fund better schools. In poorer, often rural or urban districts, schools struggle.
The Ohio Supreme Court revisited the school funding case 3 more times, and each time, again, the High Court declared the school funding system to be unconstitutional. In 2016, an attempt at a solution called the Fair School Funding Plan.
In 2021, the Ohio General Assembly passed this new formula with bipartisan support. The plan was meant to fix problems of inequity by calculating just how much it really costs to educate a child. However,
Is that at the same time, the legislature was saying, you know, let's give a voucher for families to send their kids to private schools, regardless of how much money they make.
last year, close to $1 billion in state funds were redirected toward private school vouchers. And right now, nearly half of the public school districts are suing the state, calling religious private school vouchers a violation of the Ohio Constitution, which bars state money for schools from going to religious groups.
Right now, private schools that receive taxpayer dollars for vouchers have next to no accountability. They don't have to follow the same academic standards that public schools do.
And when state or federal dollars fall short, local taxpayers are often asked to make up the difference with more school levies and higher property taxes. After an entire generation of battles over school funding, the solution is still elusive as another school year comes to a close.
Now, the Ohio House this month passed a budget that has big impacts on school funding, such as more money for school vouchers and how much extra cash are schools allowed to carry over into the next year instead of giving it back to local taxpayers. The budget is now under consideration by the Senate. And so our series continues tomorrow as we dig deeper into that Fair School Funding Plan that I mentioned. We'll hear from 2 local districts that have relied on this fair school funding and how they are now facing a future without it.
This is such a complex topic, and everybody who pays property taxes wants to know where their money is going. And it's finally like starting to put those pieces together, I feel like.
Has there been a time in recent years where it seems like a seismic shift in education funding?
Yeah.
Can you remember a time that we had this much change going on?
Well, you know, as you know, when it came to this Ohio Supreme Court ruling on how schools are funded and ruling that it's constitutional 4 separate times. And there still hasn't been an answer. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this series, to help people understand where the money is going, what the controversies are. You know, we're not taking a side either way. We're showing the pros and cons, you know, and let voters decide, because it really does make a difference. And I feel like a lot of people don't really want to wrap their brain around it because it's very complex, but it really is consequential.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
All right, Lena,
Look forward to
thank you so
part
much.
2.
So much still to come.